So there is a new power build on the block. Well, actually it's an older power build, but it belongs to none other than the elementalist in the form of the Power Fresh Air Tempest. Now, I am not a big time elementalist player, and most of the Ellie builds typically follow a similar trend of blowing some key skills with incorporating filler skills, but this rotation is one that actually is pretty easy to follow, has a fair amount of survivability thanks to the water trait line, and has the ability to be made easier by swapping out some of your DPS utility skills for more on-demand supportive utilities. The benchmark of this build is somewhere between 43 and 46k if you can optimize, but I was able to pull into the low 30s after just about 5 minutes of practice. As somebody who doesn't play elementalist, I wouldn't be recommending it if I felt like it was overly complicated, especially with the more supportive utility skills. So for this build, you run water 233, air 332 with the key trait being fresh air, and tempest 311. For gear, you run full berserker's gear, scholar runes with power and precision food, and 1+5 precision infusion, which will get you pretty close to crit cap. You rock scepter warhorn with force and accuracy sigils with relic of the firework. The rotation is basically you just spam air overloads using fire and air skills in between and then back to air for another overload. Most of your damage just comes from your air overload. Basically, you cycle air, water, air, fire, air, water, air, fire, back to back to back with only a few seconds between air and then another few seconds between air overload. It is actually pretty satisfying to play, and as far as elementalist rotations goes, it feels less like a piano than some of the other builds. It also has a significant amount of built-in utility thanks to soothing mists and the frequent cycles into the water attunement. I ran it in some normal mode strike missions and did some open world stuff, and I think it works pretty well all around. The more you practice and the quicker you get with cycling and filling the gaps, the higher your DPS will be. Personally, I am no elementalist player, but I was able to carry my weight as a DPS player in various pug groups. I don't really see this as a problematic build just because it has high DPS in the golem room. I feel like it has a pretty low skill floor in a sense that almost any player can pick it up and be decent, while those who really practice and get the high APM going can get a lot of damage out of it. It is definitely suitable for raids, strikes, fractals, even in the CM categories where power builds are useful. The pros of this build is that it has a lot of AoE, making it useful for the open world and dealing with trash. It has high DPS and the option to slot in more utility with some of the Tempest shout skills if you want an even simpler DPS rotation and you don't mind the DPS loss. Rebound is a god tier elite skill, and I don't play any elementalist build without it. The cons of this build is that it is pretty high APM if you want those big 30 or 40k numbers. Elementalist players typically don't mind this, but if you plan on playing Ellie to try this build out, you might be surprised with all of the switching around. There are also some aftercasts that can be ignored if you get the timing down right, which you'll need to do if you want those really high numbers. Additionally, you can lose a bit of DPS on targets that move around a lot, which is usually the case for power DPS, but since you drop fields with this build, if your target moves out of it, you'll definitely feel it. And with that, that's the short and sweet of the Power Tempest everyone is raving about right now, and it is pretty fun to play, and it is likely going to be solid for at least until Janthier Wilds comes out or there is a balance patch. Like always, thanks for watching. Thanks to all of my subscribers, and if you dig the content, please consider subscribing. Thanks again, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.